Alright everyone, we start off today talking about the Anemic U.S. jobs report for last month. It's a far cry from what we had in the first quarter, which was pretty good. And that was because Trump spent years, of course, deregulating, reforming the tax code. And what I think has happened, a lot of people are saying, well, people are being incentivized to stay home by getting like stimulus and unemployment expansions and stuff. That's part of it, but there's actually something also at play that isn't being talked about. It does involve the Democrats, not even just Biden, but I'll try to get into it. First and foremost, however, if you're watching this video on YouTube, keep in mind there will be a pinned comment below with links to 4 other video hosting sites that I use. I'm also going to start putting the link to Substack in there. I've started a Substack page, and I'm going to be doing every week or a couple times a week journalistic articles there. It'll be kind of similar to my videos, but more like edited. So more like instead of stream of consciousness, it'll actually be like have links and stuff like that. Archived, of course, in general, unless it's a YouTube video or something. So you can follow me there and sign up for the email listing. About 800 people already signed up overnight, so that's pretty good. Right now, what you have is a situation where in some states, and they're invariably blue states, you still have onerous business restrictions. And so what I think is happening here with the jobs report, they were expecting 1 million jobs to be added, which would have been great. Instead, it was about 250,000, far below expectations. Unemployment actually ticking up slightly because it didn't keep pace with the growth of the population over the same period, the growth of the working population, rather. What's happened, Bidenomics is Shakedown as opposed to Trickle Down. Now, of course, Trickle Down is a mythology. It never was suggested in the first place. That was a pejorative term dreamed up by leftists, sort of as a propaganda, linguistic propaganda attempt. But this is a shakedown. What's happened is that Joe Biden has caused already, as president, this is the contribution he's made to the economy through his, proposed wasteful spending and so forth, inflation. The price of goods month over month continues to skyrocket. Part of this, as I analyzed, is the result of his attacks on the energy industry. But also, you have something that's technically out of his hands, and it was under Trump as well. When people talk about Trump destroyed 23 million jobs, no. The federal government didn't lock anything down because the federal government can't lock anything down. It was state-led. The initial lockdown for about 2 weeks actually made sense, and I praised it at the time because we didn't know about the transmission rate and stuff like that for COVID. Unfortunately, what happened is that afterwards, sane states began to reopen and reevaluate the situation. Insane states, like New York and California, persisted in a situation in which basically box stores, Walmart and so forth, they could stay open, at least on brownout mode. Amazon and eBay and stuff, they still shipped, and private shipping services were still active. But smaller businesses that aren't part of that global network of trade were closed. And so what you've got right now is a situation where small and regional chains have been hammered. The problem is that's a huge chunk of the local economy in a lot of especially small town places. You're in a blue state, but you're in a small town location that doesn't even have a Walmart. You're screwed right now. In some cases, you are still screwed now, more than a year later after the initial 15 days to stop the spread or whatever the hell it was. Nobody even remembers at this point. What's happened is you've permanently erased millions of potential employment positions. Even if everything opens up completely tomorrow, the problem is the economic vacuum that was created, because supply and demand is a thing. The demand's there, but the small town businesses can't supply because a lot of them have gone out of business. The problem is that the box store can only compensate for so much. The Walmart has to build an addition in order to justify hiring new employees. And they're going to be making half of what they were at the ma and pa store, where some employee from 30 years ago has been laid off, was making $20 an hour, now goes back down to minimum wage. This is akin on a microcosmic scale to the Great Recession. This is sort of the same thing. There were tales of people with master's degrees who had been making $60K a year salaries, all of a sudden doing double shift at Wendy's, being underemployed. This was the problem with the Obama economy, and apparently it'll become a problem with the Biden economy. The jobs that are coming back right now, as opposed to the initial surge in jobs due to industrial production, won't be middle class or even like blue collar, lower middle class. They'll be sub-working class. They'll be minimum wage positions. So once again, people who were just coming out of the Great Recession, in part due to Trump's deregulatory and tax reform policies, now are shoved back down again. So not just the millennials now have been double hammered, because a lot of the millennials still were in those positions, just barely hitting their 30s. They're barely crawling out of sheerest poverty. And now the Democrats want to hype the Great Reset sort of big lie that they've got in order to tell people, well, we can help you, just embrace socialism. Yeah, we created all these problems and we're creating more, but just trust us, you dumb fucks. It's basically what it boils down to. It's a shakedown. And by the way, if you look at Biden's tax reform proposals, it's going to fuck the middle class and small businesses even harder. The small businesses that did survive are now going to have to pay more taxes. Amazon's not going to. This wealth tax bullshit that gets bandied around by Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, number one, is never going to happen. Number two, would be such a draconian and regressive policy economically that only a complete fool would even consider implementing it, because it would require the nationalization of industrial capacity that would never have a buyer that would be private sector. What's happened is Biden is actually throwing a tax cut to the super rich with his limitless SALT deduction restoration, which is something Trump did away with, by the way. And then small businesses, entrepreneurs, and middle classers will pay more. That's who will foot the bill for his so-called stimulation of the economy, his so-called infrastructure that's 90% pork. It's a shakedown. It's a scam. What we're being sold right now is basically just a better branded version of what we were sold under Obama when he bailed out a bunch of banks and CEOs got golden parachutes. This is the same neoliberal bullshit. It's basically a kickback to the Democrats' donor base, to billionaires that are helping them censor the dissidents that are against them, to a bunch of rich people and a bunch of multinationalists with well-connected political capabilities. That's what this is. It's a shakedown. It's a robbery of the middle class, the upper middle class, small businesses, the self-employed, to an extent even the working class. They give a handful of crumbs to the very poorest, like the lowest 10-15%, and then the rest goes to the CEO class and to the government. It's a restructuring of the economy, but it's not the kind that like any realistic leftist even would want. If they could see through all the hype, the propaganda, and the sloganeering, they would see it for what it really is. It's the same exact thing that led to the Occupy Wall Street protests. But you're not going to hear about that from the lamestream media. You see, they've decided to abdicate their responsibilities. They no longer report actually on the news. So you have a handful of people on the left and a bunch of people that are supposedly insurrectionist friendly. They're the only ones that are telling the truth right now. Bidenomics is worthless. It's pointless. And it should never be. I mean, the fact that there are Republicans that are like, well, maybe we can negotiate on this. Well, okay, you've cucked. You've sold out. It's going to take us a generation to undo the damage from this, just as it did most of a generation to undo the damage from Obama's policies and from W wasting all of our money. So it's the same neoliberal bullshit. This is, by the way, this is why Trump was elected in the first place. I'm becoming less and less doubtful that he'll mount a 2024 run simply because Biden's doing the same things that Obama did that caused him to fall out of favor. This economy should not be functioning the way that it is. We should, right now, we still have like 6-point-something% unemployment. That should be being reabsorbed. The problem is you've permanently decapitated a chunk of the business community. You've permanently decapitated 2 or 3% of all of the jobs, and they've gone bye-bye. They went bankrupt. They're gone forever, like Thomas's Dairy in Rutland, which is right down the street from me, and it pisses me off on a personal level because it's kind of cool to have an actual functioning dairy nearby and know where your milk and cheese and shit's coming from. They went out of business. Those jobs aren't coming back to the Rutland community. That's the result of Phil Scott's lockdown restrictive policies, fed in part by the supermajority of Democrats in the state legislature, under advisement from the Beijing Biden administration at this point. And those lockdowns and restrictions continue to this day. Biden's like, well, maybe you can have limited outdoor gatherings on the 4th of July. Fuck you. People should go back to normal, go back to business. The problem is that they don't want you to go back to business. They're terrified of small businesses in the middle class. They're terrified of upward mobility. When you gain upward mobility, you can potentially take a day off to protest. You have the ability to invest potentially in the competitors that are fighting with the groups that donate to their asses. That's what they're afraid of. They don't want you to have wealth. They want you to be on survival mode 24/7. That's what Joe Biden wants. He wants you to not have time to protest his policies. He doesn't want you to have the time, the leisure, or the gumption in order to make problems for DC's federal policies. That's basically what this is about. It's a fucking shakedown. And anyone who can't see through it, my God, the liberals have been so brainwashed by years of MSM propaganda at this point that instead of mounting an Occupy Wall Street protest, they put on their pink hats and say, Biden is woke. No, he's not. He's got you all completely goddamn fooled. That's about all. Peace out.